Good evening, Facebook, YouTube, and now Twitter. That's right, I have a Twitter account, Chewy7. Follow me at Chewy7 on Twitter, and these blogs will be now posted on my Twitter account. And it's the third and final video blog of the night for Friday, January 9th, 2014, 8:39 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. And here is the news report. The Boston Celtics traded Brandon Wright to the Phoenix Suns, and also they traded Jeff Green to the Memphis Grizzlies for draft picks. And also, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney is seriously considering running for president again in 2016. He ran for president in 2008 and 2012 unsuccessfully. Maybe he'll win it in 2016. We'll wait and see. And that's about it on the news. My third and final video blog of the night is about my personality profile, which is the late great professional wrestler Earthquake, also known as Shark, also known as Avalanche, also known as Golga, and his real name was John Tenta. John Tenta was one of the most great performers in the world of sports entertainment for over 15 years. John had a long and lustrous career. He was known to most as Earthquake in the WWE. That's his most successful run in the world of sports entertainment. John was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he was a good big professional wrestling fan when he was growing up. His idols in the world of professional wrestling and sports entertainment were the late great former NWA World Champion Gene Kiniski and Don Leo Jonathan, another Canadian professional wrestler. John wrestled in amateur wrestling when he was younger. He was good in Canadian. He was a Canadian champion and amateur wrestling, and he wrestled in the World Junior Wrestling Championships in 1981, which was held in Vancouver. And John got a scholarship to attend LSU for amateur wrestling, and he was on the wrestling team for LSU, but that program was dropped while John was still in school because of Title IX, which they had to have equal sports for men and women, so wrestling was eliminated. And John tried out for the football team for LSU, and he was a linebacker, and he made the junior varsity team, but he wasn't that good. He was also a bouncer at several bars in the LSU area. In 1985, John went to Japan, and he trained to become a sumo wrestler, and he used the name as Koto Tenta, and he was a good sumo wrestler. He was undefeated in sumo wrestling. He had about 8-9 matches, and he was undefeated. Then in 1986, he retired, and he went to go to All Japan Wrestling, which was owned by Giant Baba, and John wrestled there for a while. Then he wrestled in Canadian independent wrestling organizations for a few years. John's big break in professional wrestling came in the fall of 1989 when he was signed by the WWE. And he made a big impact in the WWE. He was taken out of the crowd from Dino Bravo because Dino Bravo was doing a strongman competition against the Ultimate Warrior on an episode of Superstars of Wrestling. Dino Bravo was doing push-ups, and John Tenta was on his back. And then when the Ultimate Warrior came, and he wanted John to do that as well, John sat on the Ultimate Warrior's back and then crushed him and gave him a splash. John Tenta was renamed the Canadian Earthquake, and he had Jimmy Hart as his manager, and he was associated with Dino Bravo. And the Canadian Earthquake got a big push in the WWE in late 1989 and 1990. He was undefeated. He beat several superstars like Tito Santana and Ronnie Garvin. He beat Hercules at WrestleMania 6, and then he started a feud with the immortal Hulk Hogan. Canadian Earthquake was renamed Earthquake around this time as well, and Earthquake, on an episode of the Brother Love show, Earthquake's manager Jimmy Hart was was saying to Hogan, "You're all washed up, you're a has-been," and stuff like that. When Hogan was going to attack Jimmy Hart, Earthquake comes in, and then Earthquake delivers several Earthquake splashes, knocking Hogan out, and they had to carry Hogan on a stretcher, and he was out of the WWE for about several months. But in reality, he did this angle just to film Suburban Commando, and they thought Hogan's career was over, but it wasn't. This was to set up a feud between Earthquake and Hulk Hogan, and they had a match at SummerSlam 90, and Hogan beat Earthquake by count out, but like they continued to have feuds on house shows, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble 1991. Hogan eliminated Earthquake. They had some house show with stretcher matches, which Hogan beat the Earthquake and stuff. And afterwards, like Hogan beat the won the feud, but they didn't have a big blow off on a TV or pay-per-view. And then Earthquake then gone and wrestled Greg the Hammer Valentine at WrestleMania 7, beat him easily. Then Earthquake went out into a feud with Jake the Snake Roberts. They had the thing that Earthquake was scared of snakes, but on an edition of Superstars Wrestling, Earthquake wrestled Jake the Snake Roberts, and then the snake got tied on the ropes, and then Earthquake grabs Damien and delivers a couple of earthquakes to Damien, killing Damien. And this got a lot of heat with Earthquake. Then Earthquake's on Primetime Wrestling, and he makes Quake Burgers, and these Quake Burgers was out of Damien, and like Vince McMahon got mad and flipped the burgers out. And then Jake the Snake and Earthquake have a feud, but the feud was not settled or stuff like that, because Jake the Snake turned heel, and turned heel around this time as well. And then Earthquake was put with Tugboat, which was renamed Typhoon because Tugboat turned on the Bushwhackers in a 6-man tag on an episode of Superstars between them and the Nasty Boys and Earthquake, and they were nicknamed the Natural Disasters, managed by Jimmy Hart, and the Natural Disasters had like a big push. They beat many tag teams like the Bushwhackers, the Rockers. They feuded with Legion of Doom over the WWE tag team titles. They had a match at Royal Rumble 92, which the Natural Disasters won by count out, but the Legion of Doom kept the titles because the title cannot change hands on a DQ or count out. And this was going to set up a blow-off match at WrestleMania 8, where they heard that the Natural Disasters were going to beat the Legion of Doom for the WWE tag team titles, but it was change of plans because Hawk of the LOD was suspended for failing a drug test, and then they put like Money Incorporated, $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and IRS together, and they beat the Legion of Doom at a house show in Denver, Colorado in February of 1992. But the storyline says that Jimmy Hart maneuvered Money Incorporated to get the title starts instead of the Natural Disaster taking the money, and that turned the Natural Disaster's face. Earthquake and Typhoon were faces, and they feuded with Money Incorporated for the WWE, managed by Jimmy Hart, for the WWE Tag Team Championships, and they had a long feud with Natural Disasters beat Money Incorporated by count out at WrestleMania 8, and they continued this feud well over the summer. The Natural Disasters finally beat Money Incorporated for the WWE Tag Team Championship at a TV tape in Worcester, Massachusetts in July of 1992, and the Disasters held the belt for 2.5 months. They defended against the Beverly Brothers at SummerSlam 92 and a couple of other tag teams. But the Money Incorporated regained the WWE tag team titles in the fall of 1992 when the Head Shrinkers distracted the Natural Disasters, Earthquake, and Typhoon, and Earthquake lost like $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase put the $1 Million Dream on Earthquake, and they lost the tag team titles. They feuded with the Head Shrinkers briefly, but then in January of 1993 at the Royal Rumble, Earthquake eliminated Typhoon, and they were going to be setting up for a match where at WrestleMania where Earthquake was going to wrestle Typhoon, turning on each other. I think Earthquake was going to go back heel, but Earthquake left the WWE also around this time to go to wrestle in Japan. He wrestled in Japan for a year. Then he came back to the WWE around January 1994, and he had a decent push. He beat Adam Bomb at WrestleMania 10, and then he faced off against Yokozuna. They were feuding with Yokozuna, and they had a sumo match on Monday Night Raw where Earthquake won, and Earthquake was going to continue the feud with Yokozuna, but at a house show in San Jose, California, Yokozuna injured Earthquake, and Earthquake actually had a contract dispute with the WWE. He was written off of television. He went back to Japan, but in the fall of 1994, Earthquake signed with WCW. He had to change name to Avalanche because he couldn't use Earthquake because that was trademarked by the WWE. And Avalanche had the similar gimmick for Earthquake, and Avalanche was in the Three Faces of Fear with Kevin Sullivan and the Butcher, and Avalanche feuded with Stain for several months, but he had to change his name from Avalanche to the Shock because WWE sent out a cease and desist order to WCW that John Tenta has to be called something else instead of Avalanche because the gimmick was too similar to Earthquake, or they would have been sued. So John Tenta becomes the Shock, and he was part of the Dungeon of Doom, and he dressed like a Shock and stuff like that. But John Tenta got no push whatsoever when he was Shock. He was languishing in several months in mid-card in WCW. Then he gets booted out of the Dungeon of Doom in a tag team match when him and Max Muscle face against the American Males, and the American Males beat Shock, and Shock's booted out of the Dungeon of Doom. He feuds with Big Bubba in a match for the WCW World title. The Shock wrestled the Giant, and the Giant won, and then Big Bubba Rogers comes down and shaves off, cuts the Shock's hair, shaves off his beard, and then the next week on Monday Nitro, Shock comes down and he says, "Cut the music." He told Shane Oakland, "I'm not a fish. I'm not an Avalanche. I'm not the Shock. I am a man. I am John Tenta." So from then on, the Shock was known as John Tenta, and he feuded with Big Bubba over the summer of 1996, culminating a feud with a Carson City glove match. And the John Tenta won this feud, but afterwards John Tenta was relegated to be a jobber to the stars in WCW. He got terminated in March of 1997, and he was out of wrestling for about a year, but he came back to the WWE. There was rumors he was going to be the Earthquake again, but he got a new gimmick. He got a gimmick putting on a mask and becoming Golga, who was a big Eric Cartman fan, and he was part of the Human Oddities with Kurgan and Giant Silver and Luna, and this was a funny gimmick that John Tenta had at Golga. It was a funny gimmick, mid-card gimmick for 1998 in the WWE during the Attitude Era. It was a fun gimmick, but I really wanted to see John Tenta return as Earthquake in the WWE, maybe have a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, because I heard around this time John Tenta dropped a lot of weight and he was very slim and trim, so I would have loved to see John Tenta as Earthquake again. And the Oddities kind of had a good push, but it didn't go anywhere, and by the winter of 1999, all of the Oddities, including John Tenta, Golga, were released by the WWE, and that was a shame. Then John Tenta didn't wrestle too much after that. He came back to the WWE as Earthquake again for one appearance at the Gimmick Battle Royal in 2001. He actually had a tryout match for the WWE during this time as well to return as Earthquake. The fans kind of popped for it, but there wasn't any. But WWE didn't have Earthquake in its plans to have a major push. And then John Tenta retired from the world of professional wrestling, but he wasn't feeling good, and in 2003, John Tenta was diagnosed with bladder cancer, and he tried to fight it with chemotherapy and stuff like that, but it wasn't responding. And by 2005, John Tenta stopped chemotherapy treatment because the cancer spread to his lungs. That it was inoperable. And in June of 2006, John Tenta passed away at the tender age of 42, which is very, very sad. John Tenta was a great wrestler and stuff like that. If he stayed around, or if they used him creatively in the late 90s again, there's Earthquake and feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin over the WWE title, I think John Tenta would have been a legend in the world of professional wrestling. He was a great mid-carder and stuff. He was known for the legendary feud of Hulk Hogan and stuff like that. John Tenta and Earthquake was probably one of the best heel gimmicks in the WWE for late 80s, early 90s. I loved the Earthquake. I loved his promos, and I loved that interview, what he said on Monday Nitro. I am not a fish. I am not a shark. I am not an avalanche. I am a man. I am John Tenta. And that's about it on that. I'll be back later on. Facebook friends, YouTube followers, and Twitter followers tomorrow for 3 more video blogs. One is going to be about top 10 greatest Kansas City Royals pitchers of all time. And then another one's going to be my personality profile about Bill Walton. And a third video blog will be a surprise. And don't forget, Facebook friends, YouTube followers, and now Twitter followers, coming soon to these video blogs, the top 10 greatest Astros players and pitchers of all time in 3 more days. Into the previews, my reviews of the first 13 Royal Rumbles from 1988 through 2000. And this is going to be interesting. And don't forget, there'll be video blogs soon of Julie Broughton and Heidi Pratt. Good night, Facebook friends, YouTube followers, and now Twitter. See you tomorrow.